All right, everyone. Welcome to the Share with Heart Motherhood Part 3. And I'm so excited to have three lovely people with me today who've been here on this journey with me. And one moment. The Share with Heart Motherhood. That's right. Motherhood Part 3. And so I just wanted to make sure I introduce myself, which I guess is important. So I'm Raditya Lazari. I'm from Mindful Being, and I created these panel discussions because I realized how important it is to talk about topics that we usually try to shy away from, try to avoid, when in fact they are part of our lives, especially the one that we're discussing today, that we discussed this whole month of October, which is motherhood, if you are a mother. And even if you aren't a mother, you do have a mother somewhere, maybe nearby, maybe far away. And some of the things that we're discussing might still come up for you from the different sides. So you will take away no matter what your relationship is to motherhood. So I'm super excited to introduce you the three panelists that I have today, which is Diana Manskita-Landborg, I have Jenny Murtag, and I have Swati Rohatgi, and they are spread around the world. So we have Diana is in Sweden, we have Jenny across from me on the other side, on the Pacific side, and then we have Swati in the center of Georgia. So welcome, you three. So happy to have you. Yeah, and so today we're talking about a really, really important feeling. Well, it's not just one, but particularly feelings. And the ones that I want to talk about today is shame, guilt, and the judgments around them. And sometimes the shame, the guilt isn't just towards us, maybe it's towards someone else, or it's the whole thing, and we are starting to judge. And I just wanted to start with the question of like, what comes up for you when you hear the word shame, when you hear the word guilt, and what comes up physically, mentally, what thoughts arise? And just ask yourself these questions. You can take a moment, you can close your eyes if you need to, and just check in. What resonates with you when you hear shame or guilt?
Can I start?
Yes, please. Anybody, go ahead.
Well, it's a very familiar feeling to me, unfortunately. So I really feel it in my throat, like, you know, like a lump in my throat, and like my contraction of my shoulders, and like run my heart, and just general heaviness and unease. Yeah, that's what I feel when I think of it.
And what do you, so you said ease?
No, unease.
Unease. Okay, heaviness and unease. Okay. Who wants to go next? Yes.
So as soon as you mentioned this, I knew exactly what I was writing down, because I feel like I've really been in this week. So thank you for doing that. Because like the first thing that pops into my head is how, as a parent, there's all these shoulds, these comparisons, so many things that go in line with guilt and shame. So one of the first things that comes up for me is like, oh, seeing what other people are doing, I should feel guilty. I should feel a little more shame for not being this or not doing that. Or if I do feel guilty, then I feel guilty about that, or I feel shameful for that, especially with my occupation. You know, I talk a lot about guilt and doubt and overwhelm, and that's part of how I empower parents. And so there's this shame of like, oh, but I'm still dealing with it too, when I'm constantly telling people, yes, of course, we're all dealing with this. It's not about figuring out how to get rid of those emotions completely. They're not supposed to go away. They're there to be guideposts for us. They're meant to be indicators for us, and they're perfectly natural and normal to feel. But so it's interesting when I stop and like I can reflect on that and kind of step out of my head into my body and realize, this is my mental response to the tension that you mentioned, Diane. Those same spots for me, throat, being able to speak up, carrying that weight. So for me, my solution is turning to energy work and to some mindfulness practices, a lot of mirror work, and redirecting my self-talk.
Wonderful. Yes.
And I completely resonate with the feelings in the body, I think nobody talked about the belly. My stomach gets all squishy and squeezy and constricted. There's lack of appetite. Or if I'm eating, it's not digesting well. That's a clear indicator that the mind is involved. And for me, guilt and shame is something that I've been carrying from childhood to teenage to adulthood to marriage to being a parent. And it's a lot of baggage I've carried. And I think I've come to a point where I've decided to drop it somewhere now because I can't take it anymore. And I think just the awareness and the consciousness around this fact that I am so done with it. I think that's a huge step in just trying to like heal and probably a lot of positive affirmations, especially this one that I looked up yesterday from Jay Shetty. He said, "You are exactly where you're meant to be," and just tell that to yourself every day.
Oh, I love that you ended with this because it is so, so, so important. Because one thing that came up for me earlier when I thought about this was really to just notice that this is happening right now. That doesn't define the rest of my day, the rest of my life, right? It's just this particular moment that's coming up. One like out of the ordinary example is like we were talking about happiness in the past few days. It's like, what is happiness to you, right? And so it's kind of like the same thing because it's something that comes and goes, right? And some it's just because it's something easily to relate, right? Because usually when we talk about shame and guilt, we have specific ways of being, specific things that happen throughout the day that we relate to them, that we immediately go to them. And so the thing that I wanted to also explore today, I mean, obviously we want to talk about what are the things that make you feel guilty and shameful about certain aspects. Like maybe there are some daily things that you would think of, right? The funny thing for me is I personally, and I just had this conversation with my husband last night about food. Like I have no problem taking the last piece of food. I do not feel guilty because it's like, it's been here, nobody take it. I will want it, so I'm gonna take it. Maybe I should consider to ask, does anybody want this last piece? This is something I have to practice. But in general, this is my way of doing things. So I have not much of a relationship to guilt in that sense. I will talk about something in specific that I really realized that is happening for me that I think is important to bring into this room. But before I do that, I want to go around the room and just see what a specific situation does come up for you on a regular basis. And even if it's not regular, but something that you really think is like a heavy thing on you. All right, don't go to 10, maybe a 5. You don't need to pour your heart out right in this moment as we are live here, but just something that you notice. Yeah.
I can go. Because it's arising for me right now. It's really what Jenny was kind of mentioning a little bit. It's like my occupation. I'm 34, not settled financially, and that really gets to me. But what's interesting is when this guilt is very interesting. It likes to have buddies, So when one incident arises, it's like, okay, let me put my fingers on other things in your life, and everything looks like it's like I can't say, but it's like an outburst of fireworks from everywhere, because then every aspect of your life is like, okay, I'm guilty because I chose this person for me, or I'm guilty because I made this decision in my life, in my teenage years, and it just rotates around everything you do. And the ultimate feeling is like heaviness and this baggage that, okay, now this is all that I have to juggle. It's all me, can share this feeling because I'm already ashamed. So I think just the fact that I'm not settled right now and I'm still trying to find my way, it gets to me. And I look at my son and I'm like, well, what is he going to say? What does your mom do? Well, she's still finding her way, so that's something that I'm kind of working on and coming to terms with, that it's okay. Again, it's okay to be where, I'm okay and I'm fine where I'm meant to be. I'm actually there. So just those self-affirmations again.
Thank you for sharing, Swati. And I think you're bringing up now a few times, this affirmations, these positive affirmations, which is really to call in the opposite of where we feel the shame and guilt, to remind ourselves that there is more than this, right? And I love that. And I think that's something to take away from here for sure.
Can I build on to that? Because yes. Partly with the affirmations, that they are really great, and just not only affirmations. What helps for me, I have this gratitude journal, so I read in the evenings, and they have these good thoughts, things that like good reminders what life is all about, and it's, for me, it's even helps even more than affirmations, just to read those quotes that, as you, Jenny, thought that these feelings of shame and guilt, they are natural, just reminder for ourselves that we are human beings on a human being journey, and these will come and go. What we need to learn here is to learn how to deal with it in the best way, so it doesn't drag us down every time. So these kind of things really help me. And what Swati was talking about, for me, this guilt and shame part as well, because I'm 43 and I'm still finding my way. I've been used to be a very independent person. For me, it was very important to have my own job to prove that I'm worthy and I am free and everything. And then my body just broke down, which we will talk about next week. So and this is, of course, the days when I compare myself, as Jenny said, to others. Those days, this shame and guilt just bombarded me, because I come from culture where you were measured by the things you do, if you're good in things, and also a Catholic culture, whereas guilt and shame is a big part of the religion. So yes, I've been also carrying it for whole my life, so it's really, really familiar feeling for me. But what I noticed, what I'm truly grateful for, is that I kind of released it in a way. So I still have those, but I at those times I remind myself that but I'm a human being, it's okay, and it's old feelings, and I can start to discharge them. But sometimes when they really overwhelm me, I actually call a friend or someone who I know I can trust and I can talk to, or trust him, or talk to my husband, and he just reminds me, it's fine, and it usually goes away.
Wow. Can I'm just going to add something with Diana, because it's so linked what she said. It's about how you said you come from a society where success is measured by what you accomplish, and there's always and I think it's the same for where I come from as well. And what's interesting is very path for me, my own expectations, that path. And now I think it's so forgiving. I'm so forgiving because it's my path. I picked it. I'm in charge.
Swati, your reception, I think your dryer or the washer started. I took away some power from you.
I'm so sorry. Did you guys lose me for?
Yes, we have lost you. You can start again by saying what you wanted to link to Diana's. I think we have barely heard anything of that, so you could just go there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, sure. So I was just telling that I can relate to what Diana says, that I also come from a culture where your success is measured by your accomplishments, and not just by who you are. And my parents chose a career path for me. And, that was the norm, that your parents know the best for you. And I was not able to meet those expectations, and even my own expectations. I wasn't able to excel in that path. So finally, at 33, I chose something for myself. And, it's interesting because I feel like there are expectations, but I can see how forgiving I am in that path, because I don't carry that weight anymore of guilt and shame. I'm like, this is what I chose. This is what I want to do. It's so liberating. So I just feel like when you make your own choice, when you're in charge, that is so liberating, that there is not much room for guilt and shame. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Swati. I mean, this connects a little bit to the experience that I had. So I was just visiting my family, my parents and my brother in Switzerland, and I left my husband and my son in the States. And usually people would feel guilty to do so, right? And I actually have to admit, I did not feel any moment of guilt or shame that I did this. And I was asking myself, why and how is this possible? And I realized the one reason I can give is that when you check in with the other people that are involved in the situation, when people are allowing you and telling you that it's okay for you to do something, that is the giveaway. This is for you to take and to say, okay, I got this okay from over there. That is for me to release any of this stress, any of this shame or the guilt that I will carry with me. And so what happens, what I noticed is that oftentimes we don't think it's enough. We don't think it's enough that when the other person said it's okay for me, we question if they actually meant that it's okay for them. And that is the question that we have to ourselves. We don't think it's enough, because if I would say, yes, you can go, in the back of my head, I would think that it's not okay. And I remember way back when I was not married, where I was just in a relationship, I would get so upset about my husband going to see his friend that is an hour round trip out of the city, leaving me behind. And I was there by myself, and I would get furious. I would be like, why are you leaving me? Right? Now I'm like, why are you not going? It's like, I thought you said you're leaving. Why are you still here? And it turned around. He now feels that he can't do these things because maybe he's telling me it's okay to go, which I just realized now, when in fact it isn't. But again, I don't think that's the case, because he was really fine being here with my son and all this. And so what I'm trying to bring here into this room, and I don't know, Jenny, what you have to add to this as well, is just to observe and notice, is it something that's happening inside of me because of the other person that I'm not trusting? Or has it have to do with just wanting to feel guilt and shame? Because sometimes we also feel a certain comfort in that experience. Like even, Swati, you're sharing with us, right? That's been going on since you remembered, right? So how can we then feel comfortable saying, I don't need to feel this way anymore? It's a process, right? For you to say, this is too much now, had to involve with you going within and say like, oh, I need to figure this out for me. It's not healthy for me, right? To disconnect for them. But for many of us, we actually find comfort in these discomforting emotions. And so, yeah, I just wanted to bring this into this conversation and seeing like what comes up for you when you think about it, like what is it affecting you? Yes, please.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. And actually with everything's been said so far, you all brought up such beautiful, amazing points that I'm like, yep. I can relate to all of that. So thank you. Raditya, I had this thought yesterday. I actually made a 3-minute video like 9 o'clock last night on this idea. And what I've been thinking about it is we are very much in the habit. We're comfortable, we're familiar with not necessarily receiving. So that guilt we have when people are even offering us help, or when we're asking for help, but then we might push it away anyways. There's a lot of social conditioning to no, it's okay. I will be fine. I will survive this. I'll be okay. Don't put yourself out for me. There's a lot of that social conditioning, especially if you're born into the female experience. And I was just thinking about how often we're so much more familiar with that. We really do. What's the best word for it? But we really do push away these opportunities to receive because we don't feel like we're worthy. So yesterday I saw a friend who clearly was not in a good emotional space, and just kind of like looked at her, made that connection. She was doing a very, very hard thing. And I just went over to her and asked, like, hey, do you want someone to go with you? Like, my son and I were coming in, my husband was home making dinner. I thought, like, okay, I can just tell something's wrong right now. I can be available. I'm going to ask. And she took a second, but then she said, like, yeah, would you do that? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so we spent the next couple of hours together, helping her in this process. And I was so glad that she said yes, because it would have been so normal for her to say, no, I'm okay. Even as she's in this situation, like her tears are coming out of her eyes. She's doing something alone by herself. And it's just, there's so many times where as parents, as mothers, postpartum, especially, we say, yeah, I'll be okay. Everyone does this. Everyone has to have hard things. This won't kill me. This will make me stronger. When we don't have to have help to be able to receive it. I think just if something will benefit you a little tiny bit, it's okay to ask for that support, and it's okay to accept it. And I think, unfortunately, that's an idea that not many people feel they can have and feel they can act on. And I would love to see that shift happen in motherhood. I think it's just a lot of power there.
Yeah, I agree totally, Jenny. I can add you because, well, when I'm a parenting ambassador, I always see that it's like, it's coming back all the time, but especially mothers, and especially the ones who are stressed the most. It's exactly when I get these guilt and shame feelings still sometimes the most, is when I myself haven't had time for myself, haven't taken care of myself, haven't been, doing my meditation or walk in nature or swimming in the lake. At those times, it comes just knocking on my door. And I remember when I was worst off, I couldn't relax. I couldn't sit there just, watching TV alone or watching a video, YouTube or something, without feeling guilt or shame for doing that, because I thought I needed to be very efficient. I needed, to work, and I needed to take care of my family and kids and be a better mother all the time, just pressuring myself. And this guilt and shame was the driving motor behind that. And it was part of the reasons why I burned out as well, because it just was driving me to do more, better all the time, because otherwise, if I relaxed, I felt guilty. But at the ground of that was that I didn't feel good enough, worthy, as you say. So I just wanted to point it out. And another thing about guilt and shame, where it comes up for me also in the family as a mom, is that when I see my children sad, or like with my husband has down days and so on, and I feel like the worst wife, and I feel helpless because I feel that I can't help them. And I mean, I shouldn't help them with all the things as well, because they also have to go through these feelings. But sometimes I just feel so helpless, and I feel guilty that not doing that. And also with postpartum as well, when my son was little, I was just ashamed that I couldn't handle it, that I was so tired, that I wanted my husband to take him. I just wanted to sleep sometimes, and I just felt so guilty. So yeah, I totally can relate.
Yeah, and that brings me to my shame and guilt that I have, and that's not something that comes up on a regular basis, but it came up in this past year, especially because we as parents decided to have only one child. And here we are in a pandemic, and having a kid that has to play by himself, want our attention because there's nobody else. And I cannot tell you how often, especially, when we go to places, and he needs my attention, and I just might not want to, or just can't, or whatever the situation is. And I felt, and sometimes still will feel forever, probably, some type of guilt and shame, having made that decision for myself. And always I have to remind myself that this is the decision I had to make for myself, so I can be a better person for him. Because I know we touched on this in the first panel discussion. One of my vices is anger. And so you do not want to be around me when that's active. And this was one of the things that told me that I cannot have another child, because the stresses that I would experience, and again, thank you to Swati bringing postpartum into our conversation, made me realize that that must have been what was happening. Of course, maybe if I would have known this when he was 2 years old, and I would have had this, confidence to ask for help, because I don't think I would have had it. And I'll get to this in a minute. What that also came up for me in the past few days is that it's something that I made a conscious decision for my own sake and health, right? And so, not to say that knowing that this was or is still be, I don't know, a postpartum experience and carries through, that might have been solvable and I would have been able to have another child. I always have to remind myself I am with a partner who is an only child. So it's not from nowhere that this also was guiding me into this direction. And so there's always this other side that I have to remind myself I made a clear decision to do this for whatever the reasons are, even if those reasons could have been changed or adjusted to have another opportunity. And for me, it's to always just remind myself that it's okay. We don't all have to have 2 children just because it's one of the norms. And I know that there was a lot of judgment from my end towards other parents who had 2 or 3 or 4 children, because I felt guilty that I didn't do this. And so therefore I judged them. It's like, why, how can you do this? How are you able to even pay attention to all your children? How can you be there for them? How can you be this? And I realized that this is not fair. This is not right. I should not make these judgments on them either, because even if they might make judgments on me, no matter what it is, the judgment has to do with my own shame and guilt. And this is why I brought judgment as well into here, because once judgment is coming up, we know that there is something else happening, because other people are never the problem. And so one of the story that I wanted to bring in here that came up last week when I was visiting my grandmother was that the first thing she was talking about was, how on earth can you put a child into daycare as early as under 1 year old? She had 6 children, of whom she was there every single day. And interestingly enough, I mean, obviously, time has changed from my grandmother's time to today's time, how women can work, how we are being integrated in society, at least from a working perspective, not necessarily from the perspectives that we're discussing here as part of motherhood and the physical experiences that we're having and how we're integrated into society from that perspective. But I realized that I felt judged because I did that too. She wasn't talking about me per se, but still it was a judgment going on. But who knows what was her shame and guilt? Maybe she wished she could have taken more time for herself. But as the first instinct that we're having is to defend ourselves, to avoid and resist anything that's happening around us, right? And so that's where I see we need to understand that help is required. And so, yeah, for me, same thing was coming up for the past, for November is my focus, is I need your help, is something that we need to get comfortable with, because we have for the reasons that Jenny was mentioning it, we're having these challenges to ask for help for different reasons, right? The reasons can be because I don't want to harm anybody else's time, like take away someone else's time. I don't want them to do something for me, and maybe they had something more important. Or it can also be because I'm afraid to hear the answer of no, I can't help you. When you are just opening up so much and you just like, I just shared my heart to you and you can't help me, and so there are different sides to that. So yeah, I just want to open up again to my lovely panels, because I just went here into my own experience. And so yeah, what you have.
Oh my God, Radhika, you said so many things, and I don't know where to start from, because it's all true, and I can relate to you with one child, because I have one child and probably stopped my factory right there. And I was like, this is it, because of, and thanks, Jenny, for bringing up the postpartum again, because it's such an important part of motherhood discussion, and it should be. And, I'm just trying to get my train of thought together, but I think there were two things that really came up with everything that I've heard. One is, I think I'm inferring self-care is the antidote to guilt and shame, probably. And you cannot pour from an empty cup. So self-care is so important. And and guilt and shame should not be a part of self-care, because it's the antidote, right? So let's take it like that. And the other thing that's coming up is judgment, like you said. I think the judgment is our problem, not the other person's problem. We have to be strong and we have to stick to our decisions. We don't do that. And that's why we get in this cycle or this loop of guilt and shame and judgment. But if we are strong, we know what we want. I think the key is, what do I need right now? And if I know that, then nothing can shake my foundation. And I have a sibling, my husband has a sibling, and we still decided to be okay with one child because he sticks with his decision and I stick with my decision, and it's okay. So no matter whatever anyone says, it's just smoothly sails through, because we know what we want, and it's for the best. And we're strong on our decision. So there's no judgment.
I'm playing with emojis. I think it worked.
Yes, you're up.
I want to connect two things you said, Swati, because God, once again, all of that was so important. So I don't want to try to re-say it. You said it beautifully. So you talked about, like Raditya said, judgment, it has to do with ourselves. And then you also said we cannot pour from an empty cup. And so I want to connect those two things, because I think there's the power in reflecting, as we've mentioned, whenever something's coming up and I'm judging, what is that saying? What emotions am I actually feeling? What am I experiencing? And what is this telling me I want to change within my experience? And that same thing is an indicator for our cup. So the group I lead, the Parent Empowerment Movement, our philosophy is, my partner and I, we're teachers. We know a lot about supporting children's needs, working with them, doing things developmentally appropriate on their level. And knowing that is not enough to really thrive in parenthood. Parents need to know how to do that, take care of those things for themselves. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you're trying to fill up your kid's cup and you have no water, it will not work. You have to take care of yourself to take care of your child. Just like if we're seeing these things that make us angry or frustrated as we're having judgment, it's like, what does that mean? I need to take care of for myself, because I sure as heck can't change what so-and-so down the street or on the other side of the globe is doing, and I have no business changing it. But what can I change in myself, in my world, in my experience that actually will better impact me? So I think everything we're talking about is completely related. And I think the common link for me is, if I want to change something within my parenthood, change something for the better for my child, for my spouse, I have to start with doing it for me. And that's not selfish. That is wise. that is practical, that's efficient, that's responsible, because that's going to make me a better parent. It's going to make me a better contributor. And I still have to remind myself of this every single day, because I still have all those other ideas and norms ingrained in me, and I'm still learning. And the more I talk about them and the more I encourage these things, I feel like I'm more acutely aware of when those things do happen. So I think it feels more intense, and then I kind of feel more of that guilt and shame, like I was mentioning at the beginning. But that doesn't mean that I'm failing to learn these things and to do these things. Like, nope, I'm just increasing my awareness, and I'm feeling this more, and I'm in it more, which has benefits and challenges. There's always that duality. Nothing's ever by itself. Everything always comes together. So thank you, everyone, for all the wonderful things you're saying. This is so important.
Yes.
Can I just jump in? Thank you, Jenny. It's yes. I say everything yes to all of you. And I think I will remind what I was talking about the first panel discussion we had about motherhood. That's what helped me heal, because I had a huge amount of guilt and shame, especially when it came to self-care. Even though I had to burn out, I still had really bad time and guilt and shame of taking care of myself. And I felt guilty that I didn't earn money and I didn't share that burden with my husband. And even though I wanted to be as connected and good my mother, and I chose to do that, and I spent a lot of time with my kids, I still felt guilty that I wasn't being with them enough every time they were, sad or disappointed. So, but it was actually, everything was inside of me. I needed to work with myself. But what conscious parenting taught me, that everyone is a mirror, as you say, Jenny. That's helped me heal so tremendously. That look at everyone who is triggering me or making me judgmental, or I feel that I get judgmental towards, to see those people as my greatest teachers. My mirrors, they're mirroring something to me, so I can go inside and look without guilt and shame, but with curiosity, like a small child has, or like, a scientist who wants to find out, interesting, why am I reacting like that? And just like because that's, I also feel that when I help a lot of parents, that they start asking these questions, but then they have guilt and shame for having these feelings and doubts and so on. So it's very important to be kind to ourselves during these journeys, and really, without guilt and shame, try to look with curiosity. How come I came like this? How come I have these feelings? Interesting. Okay, so what can I do to change that? And just notion that everyone else is our teachers helps so tremendously to be less judgmental and to be kinder and learn and heal. That was what helped me so much. So thank you all for bringing this up.
I mean, it couldn't be anything better you could have said, because what you just described, this whole, inquiry and curiosity, is something that I wanted to actually bring our conversation to an end, in sense of like, what can we do? How can we get in touch with that sensation, that feeling, that, that shame, guilt in our body, right? Because the way you talked about it, I can feel how it's in your body, and you're feeling it in your body. All of us, whenever we were talking about it, it was like a connection to internal, right? As you said just now, Diana, you were just talking about like what's happening inside of us, and inside of us is a body. There are feelings and sensations that are giving signals to our brains, and the brain will then translate it into whatever we make meaning of that happened in the past, and we predict it. And so I wanted to just check in with all of you and see, like, how does it show up? I know we started the conversation this way, like, what is arising for you? How does it show up in your body? And now I just want to expand it, like, can you recall, or how do you know something's off in your body? When do you know, like, I need to take care of myself? When do you notice it physically? Because I want to bring more attention to how we feeling things in our bodies, and not think so much, because our thinking are the are actually holding us back to sense something in our body, and we will misconstruct what's actually happening, because like Swati described at the beginning, that feeling in our tummy, that turning and twisting, right? It can also be misinterpreted because it's been like this always. It translates in a way that we are used to thinking. But once we actually notice, like, oh, how does it feel? Is it different than when I'm excited of something? Is it actually different, or is it same? Is it just slightly different, or is it because my relationship to what's happening right now makes me think that what's happening in my body indicates that I am feeling shame and guilt, when in fact the way that feeling in our tummy can also be excitement, it can be nervousness, it can be so many different things. So what I want to point out in this last section is to really be more familiar with the things that we're feeling and disconnecting on what we think we're feeling, because then we have a greater way to connect in the moment that something's happening, and actually not think something should be a certain way, or it's not how it's supposed to be. And that's where the shame and guilt is coming up. That's when judgment is coming up, right? And the moment we can notice, oh, it's that thing in my tummy, it makes that twisting feeling, and we all of a sudden have more awareness in other situations where I have that twisting feeling, like going on a roller coaster, for instance, which is a fun thing if you like him, then you start to notice your experience differently. So the floor is yours. Let me know what and how do you go through these experiences, and how would you be able to help yourself to give yourself that self-care?
So I think Radhika, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, Swati,
Yes. I think when you talked about that belly, my stomach getting all squishy and churning, and then you're right, it can be excitement, or it can be something that's bothering me. The way I can tell the difference is there's a feeling of heaviness and lightness attached to it. So if I feel lighter, I know I'm excited. And also my mind is always connected to the body. So I'll be having happier thoughts. Like, for example, we're going on a trip. I'll be like, okay, what should we do next? I'll be planning. Versus if I'm bothered or if I'm triggered, I'll be like, where's my cave? I need to hide. I'll be planning, like, how do I isolate myself? So you can tell that, am I moving towards integration or am I moving towards isolation? And kind of, I think you can tell by that. And just by little things like, we don't say this much, we've been husband and wife for 10 years. You don't say I love you, but in those moments you're like, oh, I should tell that to him, how much I love him, how much I care for him, versus like, I despise you and I just want to find ways to make sure that I despise you right now. So I think that's where the differences come. But that's pretty much what that was coming to me. I wanted to point out.
great. I love it.
I think I was thinking something similar, where I find myself noticing those first actions I'm starting to take, and I kind of get into this observation witness mode. I think earlier this week or last, I remember noticing, observing myself go from like 0 to white hot when my child was just doing a 2.5-year-old thing, but I responded, and I caught myself like doing this big inhale, almost like what I would do to start raising my voice, yelling, whatnot. And I kind of felt my body doing that. And so I just kind of kept continuing breathing. I could breathe into it a lot more, so that I could kind of honor the energy that was there. And I let it peak and felt it and honored it and recognized it, and then opened my mouth just to release it. And that felt like a really nice, tangible tool where I wasn't gonna like squash the energy down, but I recognized, oh, it's here, it needs to get out. Okay, instead of yelling, I can exhale. I can still get that same level of satisfaction. And it makes sense that worked, but I was also genuinely amazed how different I felt after doing that. So when I see myself in those moments of I'm starting to do something that does not feel in alignment, does not feel good, that's when I start talking to myself or I talk to somebody else. So for example, we've talked about postpartum. There was a point I hit in the middle of the night. I got aggressive with my partner because I was so sleep deprived, because I was experiencing what I think was postpartum rage or anger. I don't even know what it was. And that's the point where I said, this doesn't feel right. It's time for me to ask for help. And so I started talking to someone. So whether you're finding a friend or someone that you pay to talk to, those are both valid. Those are both really wonderful things. And another way, when I know like, okay, I can talk myself through this, is I actually will leave the room when it's safe to do so and go into the bathroom and look in the mirror and talk out loud to myself, whether it's I'm down and just feeling like negative self-talk happening and I need to kind of look in the mirror and say like, okay, snap out of this. Let's gain some perspective. You're doing this great. This is working out. This is normal. This is okay. And I also even do that when I feel like something's going well. And I know like I need to kind of build up this habit of recognizing how well I'm doing, recognizing how good. So I'll also leave the room, go into the bathroom, look in the mirror and start talking myself up. I kind of get this image of like, okay, what is it like when someone's on The Voice or like those other things and that, you know, someone blows them away. Like I have that parenting moment, like getting a 2-year-old to brush teeth happily. That's where I stand up and say, you just nailed that. That went so well. You've been working so hard for that and you achieved that goal. Like it was just brushing teeth, but like people that have tried to brush toddlers' teeth know that that's a pretty big deal. So I honored it and celebrated it. So I try to do that equally to kind of build that part of myself up so that it feels a little better when I'm supporting those other experiences.
Wow.
That was a great suggestion. Again, Jenny, I need to go to the bathroom mirror more often, I think. That was great. Great, just, you know, to acknowledge the positive things as well. It's really important, I think. What I do, what I mentioned already a little bit, that I feel my body. And then I talked about in the breath seminar during Spiritpreneurship, that during these years, I kind of became quite good in noticing my body. So this guilt and shame feels much more heavy for me. It feels more like a lump and heaviness, and I really feel it. And sometimes I even hold my breath in those times. It's like I'm breathing and just like hold it, like you say, Jenny, like you're building up for something. And these times I know, so I usually breathe out slowly. And for me, it's very important, usually just notice my breath, and just slowing my breath usually takes me down a notch and I become more sane. But sometimes all these old behaviors and thoughts are there, and these shame and guilt voices, and really these voices in my head about how bad I am, I shouldn't do that, and I'm judging myself quite heavily. So these old voices come back to me then, and I recognize them. And that's why when I feel that if I can't get rid of them by writing a journal, for example, or by, trying to focus on the positive things, and I'm just stuck in that negative behavior, then I need to talk to someone. And I talk to my husband, or if I feel I need someone else, I talk to some friends that I trust. And it really helps. As you say, it really is important to have someone you can trust and just open up and not be afraid, not feel guilt and shame for talking about it, because that's why this topic for me is so important, that we are open and talk about this, that it's okay to talk about it, but because all of us are feeling this feeling, and it's nothing wrong with them, it's natural, but it's also good for us to know how to deal in these situations. So that's the things that help me a lot. And that's also, as I said before, it's a reminder to me also that probably it's time to take better care of myself. Probably I've been then depleting myself and doing more for others, and then it's time to go back and just do something positive. So I think I will go to the mirror after this talk and talk to myself.
Great idea. We should all go to the mirror and get more familiar with who we are, because that's what we see. Even if we talk, like we said, with judgments, right? So it's like, even though we're talking to someone else, technically speaking, they are the mirror to us. So the more we are used to actually facing the mirror, literally facing the mirror, the more we actually see those actions being us, and that we're speaking to us, and that there is no other person existing in sense of what we are going through mentally, physically, emotionally, that it's all a reflection of who we are, how we see ourselves. And so I just wanted to make sure you had added everything you wanted to add before we close today's and our final part 3 of motherhood. So please share what you want to share. Yes, Swati, please.
I love the tips and tricks and all the self-care techniques that Jenny and Diana and you've shared. I think there's one thing that's arising is that it's very hard to make eye contact with yourself in the mirror when you're going through that. But I think that's where the inner work is, right? So we have to go inward in those moments and not outward. And then the second thing that's coming up is I have this problem of instant gratification, and
Who doesn't?
and with the rage I carry sometimes, if it's around guilt and shame, I'm like, I need the answer right now, I need to fix this right now. I think I've slowly started working towards where can I sit with this feeling and be okay? Or do I need to send those nasty texts right away or be nasty with people? Can I deal with my own problems? Can I deal with my own feelings? So that's again a lot of inner work. It goes back to the same thing. So I think that was one realization that dawned on me that I'm working on. That can I sit with my feelings and not just hurt someone and pour them on someone? That's not a healthy outlet. So
Perfect. Yeah.
Can I just add,
Yes.
Swati? That's what also, sorry that I'm talking so much about conscious parenting, but it's about motherhood. It's one of the things that Dr. Shefali says. She's call it conscious pause. And it's also been very helpful. So that's what I was also talking at the first seminar, that it's when you notice these arising and when you are more aware of your body, what's happening, this conscious pause, that's what I was talking about, just starting to breathe. And as Jenny said, sometimes maybe if you have possibility, go away, go somewhere else, just breathe. Only that, just slowing your breath consciously will make your body just for a few minutes, and then you will not feel the need to send these texts. That's the amazing about this conscious pause. Just it doesn't need to be long. Just few breaths actually can help really to stop it. So yes, being with the feeling, but breathing slowly at the same time, not letting our mind dictate the story in our head. More go back, as you say, to your body and actually change the breath to the slower. It actually slows the nervous system down and actually relaxes and calms it down, and then you don't feel the need to send that text.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
It really helped me, at least. So
I'm glad you brought. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Self-gratification and that need to wait. Yes, thank you both for bringing both those up. And I'm really glad, Swati, you mentioned how intimidating it can feel to look yourself in the eye in the mirror. And I want to offer the idea that maybe part of that is because when we're doing that, we're mothering ourselves. And the truth is, a lot of us, if not every one of us, has a great power as mothers, because we know we have to, because we're inspired to, because we're loving these humans so much that we want to be there so much, that when we are talking ourselves up, we're looking at a lot of power. And seeing ourselves with that much power and interacting with that much power feels different than other interactions we have, I think. And I think part of it is learning to give ourselves that credit, learning to see ourselves in that light. And the beauty there is that then we can then mother ourselves better. If I listen to the things that come out of my mouth that I tell my child about, sometimes you have to try a lot of different times before something works. You usually don't do something perfect the first time you try it, as I'm like just leaving my office from like, I did this thing and it didn't work. And then I tell myself like, oh yeah, it's because you did it for the very first time and you're learning how to do something, Jenny, because I'm also 34, also rediscovering myself, also still figuring it all out. And so I'm having to learn a lot of new skill sets. And then I go tell my toddler, like, it's really hard learning how to build blocks in that way or how to tie your shoes. And I'm like, it's really hard learning new things. So I see a lot of power in all of us. And so practicing letting that power be there and seeing it in ourselves and receiving our own power, I think has a lot of power. So hopefully we can all challenge ourselves to do that.
Love that.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming in here in this room with me and sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, being raw with what's going on in your lives, in your minds, in your bodies, and sharing this with everyone. And I think, to me, the greatest takeaway of all is just that it's all a human experience. Nothing is right or wrong. There's no perfection required. This is just a human experience. And what I ask everyone to do who's watching this is to just be, as Diana said earlier, be kind to yourself. Be there for yourself and really understand that we need to release the things that are inside of us and not hoard them, not resist them, and not try to refuse them, but actually find a way to welcome them, to see that everything that we're experiencing is part of who we are and exactly where we are supposed to be right now, as Swati shared with us. And so with that, I want to again thank you all for being here, for doing this with me, for showing up. And there is so much more to come. As Diana mentioned, next week we're going to talk about diseases and the depression, postpartum, and the burnouts are part of that. There's cancer conversations that are going to be in here. So I'm super excited to bring this into the space. And again, being a mother, all these subjects are coming up, breast cancer, for example, right? And it's endless. And what I'm trying to do with this, what I really want us to become more comfortable with is being vulnerable, sharing the things that are going on inside of us, because the more we can do this, the more connections we create that are truly from the heart. So share with heart. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.